What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Destination the Show, episode 40. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard, fresh off a dog bite.
I didn't know that we were going to lead in with that, but yeah, I've had a busy handful of days and got off the practice field and had to squeeze my run in and run a pretty similar route literally every day. Um, and today I had a buddy that decided to join me for just about a second, and it was only with his teeth on my arm, so it got a
That's
pretty good
wild.
yeah, it was a surprise. My wife was
I
not
feel,
happy, and I'm just like I ran home and got no information, but there's time.
dude, I feel like a dog bite is not like a thing that happens to real people in real life. It's a thing that happens in cartoons. So the fact that you got bitten by a dog on a run is bizarre to me,
Yeah,
honestly.
it was a dog that I think is you have that dog to protect you. So I wasn't a danger in my opinion, but good on the dog because it certainly was protecting its owners. I
Oh,
tell you,
man. Rough
yeah, no,
times. Everything good except for the dog bite.
yeah, it's just life's been busy, right? My
Yep.
so I work in a school and it's summer school now, so that's less busy. But I was just at a conference for a few days, and my wife and I do some fostering when we're needed. So we took on another member of our family here for the time being, and
Wow, man.
yeah. How are you? How are things going where you are?
I'm doing great, man. I got no complaints. Yeah, we both work in education, right? So school year is winding down. Summer is getting rolling. We're like 30 something days out from the draft. Just shuttling my kids around places. My son is really into playing baseball at the moment. All he wants to do is hit in the backyard, and he's 5, so that is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Getting a lot of joy from that, and yeah, just locked in and ready to do this thing, man. So I'm excited. I'm excited to chop it up with you again. I feel like we have a guest every other week at the moment, which is awesome. But sometimes I like a little time and space to just chop it up with you. So we're gonna do kind of one of our split episodes here where we talk a little bit of minor league ball, highlight some prospects that have been doing some interesting things, one for each of the teams that we talk about, and then we will chop up 2 more draft demographics in our series leading up to the draft because we are getting close now, man. We're close to like 30 days away, which suddenly feels like everything is a little bit of a rush.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're just frozen in time there. I think you're actually frozen on your screen. So while Jamie comes back,
There we are.
oh, there we go. Good.
We're,
I just thought you were like excited there. You looked excited and then you stayed
so,
excited.
so excited that I froze. I do think we are going to run into some technical challenges today. There's a little bit of weather around where we are, and a little bit of a signal challenge. Anyway, I wanted to know, Jeremy, did you see the Braden Montgomery injury situation from Super Regionals?
So I didn't actually see the injury, but I was coaching baseball that day. We had a break in between games. We went to a local establishment, and I was facing, um, I think the Georgia game, which was not close. And my son, who was across from me, was facing some other screens, and he's like, "Dad, who's Braden Montgomery?" And I'm like, "One of the best players in college baseball." And he's like, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
he's wearing a thing on his leg." And I turned and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's not good." But I don't think that does anything to his draft stock, right? Is that fair?
For sure. For sure, I agree. I'm just mostly bummed. Yeah, I'm just mostly bummed out because the College World Series starts on Friday. It's a really loaded field, 4 SEC teams and 4 ACC teams.
Right.
And there's a ton of draft talent in it, and it would have been great for a kind of consensus top 10, probably more likely top 5 guy to be able to show off what he can do in one of the better offenses in the country. So mostly bummed out from that perspective. Sounds like
Right.
he is going to make a full recovery in the next couple of months. And speaking of injuries, dude, one other one that came to my attention this week, Cade Horton is also been shut down for a little bit. He'd been doing well at AAA, so hoping for a speedy return for him. Never like to see guys miss time through injury. But on the converse of this, there are prospects coming back from injury, and in particular, I think the Twins are noteworthy here. Brooks Lee and Walker Jenkins having been reassigned here to St. Paul and Fort Myers, and Corey Lewis, who has not pitched for all of 2024 through injury, I believe is reassigned to Wichita today. And how's this? I'm curious for your take on this. In the last 6 weeks, Wichita have added Corey Lewis, Zebby Matthews, and Andrew Morris to their rotation.
Yeah, and I think that's not a surprise because those guys were all good at high A last year. Did Morris get some time at Double A last year, or was he the first? He was the first one to Cedar Rapids last year, right?
Yeah, he was the second guy up after Zebby, like a week or so behind this year.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think the headline so far has been how Zebby Matthews has been doing, not just before promotion, but since his promotion too, and we could certainly talk more about that. But going back to that last tidbit on Cade Horton, I saw that he went on the injured list. I saw that he left a start. Do we know what he's dealing with?
I think the listed injury was a shoulder impingement, and I don't think there's been many more details released there yet, right? And so for me, as a just to be clear, decidedly non-injury expert, that's one of those things that feels kind of murky, right?
Yeah.
And it could be a oh, maybe he's back in 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe he's back in a couple of months. I would imagine the Cubs play it super slow and safe and wait till they feel really confident that he's feeling good again, because, with a little bit of extended run here, he is kind of on the doorstep of the majors. But it didn't sound like absolute disaster, but definitely a bummer not to see one of the better right-handed pitching prospects in baseball on the mound at the moment.
So I'm also not an injury expert, but the shoulder impingement thing is relatively new, right? That was something that we never heard 10 years ago. And I remember hearing it more frequently after Cole Stewart was drafted and trying to make his way up. And so I actually asked our trainer at school, what the heck does that even mean? And so he said a lot of words that I didn't entirely understand. But essentially what it boils down to is there's one part of your shoulder that it sometimes sticks out further. Sticks out further on some humans than others. And so when you're rotating, it becomes irritation if you have a shoulder that this bone is, more part of the rotational part. And I'm like, so how do you heal from that? He's like, well, you just have to get used to it or change your throwing motion. Now, that's not a shoulder expert or a baseball expert or if he was a trainer. And I'm like, well, that seems to make sense, because it seems like the guys that have it are the guys that then continue to deal with some sort of shoulder soreness. And then obviously with any part of your body, right, if you try to compensate for one thing, then you end up putting something else out of whack. So that's just obviously a bummer, and I think a pretty minor setback at this point. But then you always are curious how things progress. I mean, he didn't pitch a ton in college, right? He was a two-way guy that kind of lit it up on the way to the College World Series, and hasn't thrown a ton as a pro. I mean, if we're being honest, the innings are still relatively limited. So that is a bummer, because top 5 pitching prospects, you want them to stay healthy. But for every Paul Skeens that comes through and does his thing early, there's a Forrest Whitney who is a top pitching prospect in all of baseball, and then just can't stay healthy and can't figure it out. So hope for the best for Cade Horton, because electric arms are what make baseball the most fun.
For sure. No doubt there. And then last thing, dude, and what we won't dig into this now. We'll save it for later because someone asked a question about it. The DSL is up and running. Dominican Summer League. So excited to dig into that and talk about some names that are worth tracking. There's certainly plenty in every organization, but that really kind of rounds out all the levels are off and rolling, and summer is really kind of up and running baseball wise here. Okay, let's talk about some major league or minor league, prospects. I want to spotlight a couple of guys, one from each organization that we can dig into, and I kind of want to get some of your takes on these guys, right? So we're going to go alphabetical order here. We'll start with the Brewers. The guy I want to talk to you about is a relief pitcher named Craig Yoho. And our friend Seth Stowe at Twins, one of the founders of Twins Daily, did a great interview snippet with him, a Brewer fanatic, recently. So if folks want to get to know him a little better, I would encourage you to check that out. It's really, really great. He is a 2023 draftee, 8th round pick out of Indiana. Let me hit you with some stats here, man. So he's a relief pitcher. K percentage in April, 53.3%. Not a typo. K percentage in May, 44.7%. K percentage in June so far, 59.1%. And this is all with a walk rate of 9% or under. That's good for a 0.68 FIP, a 1.23 xFIP. That is 50 strikeouts in 26 innings pitched. When I took these notes down, he is all the way up to AA. And so it brings me to this. It's just like incredible performance, right? Just like undeniable, dominant. He's made it through several levels already. My question for you, my friend, is how do you feel about drafting relievers? Because I remember like a long time ago, the Twins tried this strategy under a previous regime, and they took kind of like 7, 8, 9 relief type arms in a row. It may have been the Cole Stewart year, actually. The Guardians often take a similar approach where they will target a bullpen specific guy. Most recently, Andrew Walters, who was Miami's closer last year. They took him in the 4th round. He's already up to AAA this year. He's already absolutely dominant. Looks like he's going to be a truly dominant back of the bullpen arm. So is there some kind of market inefficiency in drafting relievers at a certain point in the draft where they can provide you with real value even if they have no shot at becoming a starter? Curious for your take.
Yeah, I think there's certainly value in it, right? The part that makes it kind of hard is college baseball is kind of a disaster when it comes to pitchers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
yeah,
typically there's a reason that they're not starting in college. But in this particular case, you're talking about a guy from Indiana, right? So not necessarily a powerhouse school.
mm-hmm.
I don't have an issue with drafting guys that probably profile as relievers. And I think that's just you look at a pitching staff and 60% of them are relievers in the majors, right?
Mm-hmm.
You typically are building that bullpen out of failed starters, because if you try a guy as a starter and it doesn't work and he becomes a reliever as a failed starter, I mean, you get that one extra bite at the apple. The Twins in the JT Chagua, Tyler Duffy, Carlos Gutierrez era, we're drafting, with the exception of Duffy, because Duffy did start, but they were drafting relievers and trying to usually make them starters.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Rogers, same type of deal. I think he actually started though at Kentucky, and so there's so many different ways to get at it. But if you find an arm that is a quality arm, you don't put a ceiling on it, right? The one thing you didn't mention with those numbers were his K rate jumped in June, and that was when he got promoted. So
Mm-hmm.
he hasn't pitched much at Double A, and I don't know enough about the player development programs of these teams. If there's a chance that a guy can start, they want him as a starter. But I also know that
For sure.
in present day, there's a ton of value to have guys that can pitch multiple innings. So he's pitched 22 games and he's pitched 28 innings. So he's not strictly a one inning guy this year. So last year he pitched 3 games and threw 2.2 innings. So this year, 19 games, 26 innings. So we're talking potential multi-inning guy. And so, yeah, I have zero issue with an 8th round pick. And I should have probably dug deeper, but I'm guessing, with the way that the Brewers drafted last year, he probably wasn't a full slot guy either. So they found someone that they liked.
Mm-hmm.
They targeted him. They took him in the 8th round. They saved money. That's how they got some dudes. And if they get a major league bullpen arm that can strike out, not at this rate, but I mean double digit Ks per 9, that's a win. Now you're going to tell me that he signed for slot and that I'm an idiot, but
I don't have it up in front of me, so that's my bad.
So yeah, but I think that's if you can draft a guy and turn him into a major league player, that's a win. Big picture. Obviously, if you draft a guy 3rd overall and he becomes a reliever by the time he's in Double A, that's less of a win if he makes it to the majors. But I have zero issue with drafting a guy and him becoming a major league quality bullpen arm.
For sure. Great Goho. Definitely check out that interview from Seth over at Brewer Fanatic. A guy to keep an eye on. Certainly someone who could be making an impact for the Brewers sooner than later, especially with the injury luck they've had this season. Second guy I wanted to talk to you about, Jeremy, is a guy who we've talked about actually quite a bit for the Cubs on this show over various points in time, and that's Jackson Wiggins. Jackson Wiggins is back and has made his minor league debut. So I wanted to chop it up with you about him because I feel like he was a guy who we're both a little unsure of, right? If I remember correctly, the Cubs went over slot to get him after taking Matt Shaw with their first pick, which, early days, but that's looked like a great pick. And Shaw is a guy that we both are big fans of. Jackson Wiggins made his debut at A-ball at Myrtle Beach for the Cubs, pitched 3 innings, gave up 1 hit, 0 walks, struck out 5, and threw 70% strikes. And I think the 0 walks and 70% strikes is the part that impressed me because the scouting report on Wiggins was high octane arm, incredible stuff, does not throw strikes with enough consistency. So it's 1 appearance, right? And I'm sure there will be plenty of highs and plenty of lows, but I'm curious if this does anything to move the needle for your thoughts on this pick and just what your general takeaways are from a first performance or debut, if anything.
So that was his full season debut.
Mm-hmm.
He threw for the Arizona Cubs. The rookie level, complex level. 12 walks and 7 innings.
Sure.
7 strikeouts in 7 innings. An ERA, not that it really matters, of 10.29, gave up 4 hits in 7 innings, 9 runs, 8 earned. So I'm not going to make too much out of one good start at low A, right? He's got a lot to prove yet. I didn't love the pick at the time. I don't love the pick anymore. At this point, but 6'6", 225, he's 22. There's certainly room to grow. And when in doubt, if you take a guy from the SEC, there's a chance, right? The SEC is the premier conference in baseball. And I mean, I thought it was an interesting pick at the time. I thought it was more interesting when they went over slot to sign him. And here he is making his full season start on June 6th of 2024. And if he can become a major league quality arm, that's a win, right? And so, not to oversimplify things, but yeah, if you would have told me that he had a terrible start at Myrtle Beach after having 4 terrible starts at complex ball, I'd have been like, yeah, that's not great. But having this one good start does, help a little bit, I'm sure, for him, confidence wise, because this is probably similar to the level that he played at in college.
For sure. For sure. It's just interesting. It just makes me wonder, right? And I know we've had this conversation several times about guys just working on stuff in minor league ball, and I wonder how much of his Arizona Complex League performances he was just working on stuff, throwing a particular pitch repeatedly, working on command to a particular part of the zone, or just had a developmental focus before kind of letting it loose here. Obviously, we're gonna have to wait for a bigger sample, but an encouraging full affiliated ball debut for Jackson Wiggins. I know that's one Cubs fans have been waiting for. Last guy, Jeremy, I want to ask you about is someone we have not really talked about much recently on the show, and that's Twins prospect Brandon.
So Jamie froze up again, but that entrance was Brandon Winokur, and so hopefully he comes back here soon, because Brandon Winokur has reduced his strikeout rate 31.5% in April, 25.7% in May, to 17.9% in June, while his walk rate has increased from 6% in May to 9%, 6% April, 9% in May, and has almost doubled now to 17.9% in June. And that was a Tom Froming tweet that we saw. And so Jamie will go more in depth here when he comes back. He just jumped out because he's having some signal issues. But he'll go more in depth on his contact numbers and his exit velocity. What we've seen so far at Fort Myers, 48 games, he's batting .258, OPS 755, and with 12 stolen bases, only hit 5 home runs so far. He hit 4 last year in 17 games. So we'll see how that happens. So
Okay, Brandon Winokur. So this is our second technical delay. Lightning delay, dude. Sorry about that. Back online. Okay. Brandon Winokur, long story short, significantly cut his K rate April, May, and very small sample size in June, has increased his walk percentage significantly. The contact rates are looking better. He has the 9th best 90th percentile exit velocity in all of A ball. Around 105 miles per hour as a 19-year-old. Curious for your thoughts, because we spoke a week or so ago, right, about like what's the better path? Do you want someone like Eric Batanti, who's a similar prospect, absolutely mashing in complex ball, or do you want to challenge someone like Winokur, who was kind of keeping his head above water, but struggling a bit, which I think is to be expected. So curious if from your perspective, there's anything to make of this, and should we be getting a little bit more excited about Winokur and how things are coming along for him at Fort Myers?
No, I think the ceiling was always going to be super high, right? And so the floor also was going to be super low. And at this point in time, I don't think there's any reason to say we got to bring the ceiling down. But when you start to show improvement, incremental improvement with the things that I told you I look at first, how many times do you strike out, how many times you walk, when you start showing improvement with that, now we can bring that floor up a little.
Yep.
And so when we talk about the draft, you love to talk about the range of outcomes, right?
Yep. Sure do.
And it's still enormous here. The other thing that we questioned when it happened, because I think we both are in agreement when a team drafts a prep hitter, you like the ceiling, but there's a lot of questions. And for him, it was, where does he fit defensively? Right, he's gonna have to hit a ton because he's a corner profile, and he probably still ends up as a corner guy, but he's playing a majority of his time at shortstop and center field.
Yep.
Now, I don't think we're naive enough to believe that that's where he ends up, but if you can even be passable at shortstop, then you can definitely play third. And if you're passable at center, you can play left. He's got the arm to play right. And ultimately at his size and 6'6", 210 at age 19,
So tall.
he probably ends up at first base long term, right? But there's more margin for error if you have more if you have a more diverse profile, and I think that's what he's done. So we can keep the ceiling where it's at, and I think we can bump that floor up a little bit because he's going to hit his way to high A. Maybe not this year, but he's going to continue to move up in the system and get opportunities. So that's what you like to see, right? We're not going to ask for a whole lot more. We'd love to see it, but the kid's 19 years old, turns 20 in December, and has a chance. And
yeah,
good on the Twins for that.
Exciting stuff. Okay, let's move on. We're going to start talking some drafts. So we're going to try and overview 2 demographics here. Fingers crossed the internet holds before answering some listener questions to finish. We're going to do this a little bit like we did a couple of weeks ago before we had Carlos on. So I'm going to give an overview of some notable guys from the class, and we're going to stick within the top 100, top 150. And then I'm going to shoot it over to you to answer some kind of questions. I'm really eager to get your preferences because you've been writing a ton of positional previews for Twins Daily. So you've been getting much more into the weeds with kind of all of the guys. And we're also coming up this great conversation with Carlos Collazo from Baseball America last week. If you guys have not listened to that, I strongly encourage you to check it out. So we'll start with catcher. This is a class I've had a lot of people ask me about. RE interest, especially for the Twins and the Brewers where they're drafting at 21 and 17. So some names to know. Malcolm Moore, currently 20th on the consensus board. He's the consensus number 1 catcher. A little bit of a down 2024, 255, 414, 553, good for a 967 slug, 16 home runs, 44 walks, which was a significant increase, in 35 Ks in 54 games. The thing with Moore, a little uncertain behind the plate, a lot going on in the swing. If you look up clips of Malcolm Moore's swing from like summer of 2023, it is highly unusual. He had some bad ball luck, seems to be the story of his 2024, but his underlying metrics were good. Also feel like Stanford is a program where you might sacrifice a little bit of power for contact. Based on the approach they like to take. Second guy on the list, Caleb Loma-Vida. He's 26th on the board, 322, 395, 586, good for a 981 OPS, 15 home runs, just 12 walks. The guy does not take a walk, 43 Ks in 55 games. High chase rate. Walker Yannick, he's 28. So we've got 3 catchers already, right, between 20 and 30. He hit 364, 476, 709 for a 1.185 OPS, 17 home runs, 40 walks, and 45 strikeouts in 50 games. Also has a good Cape Cod League track record. The only slight orange flag you could give for Yannick is it's against slightly inferior competition, but easily the best defensive catcher of the college crop, in my opinion. And then 2 more, Jacob Cozart. He's 40th on the board. We talked about him a little bit with Carlos last week. A solid season through Super Regionals. He's still playing in the College World Series, right? Hit 302, 434, 613. Good for a 1.047 OPS, 19 home runs, 49 walks, and 47 strikeouts. Definitely some questions about the defense with him. People seem kind of split on whether he can stick there. He's a bigger bodied, taller, kind of like a Matt Wieters type, if you remember him, who looked like he wouldn't kind of stick behind the plate because he was so huge. And then Kevin Bizzell is the last guy. He's 52nd on the consensus board, more of a hit over power type guy with some uncertainty about whether he sticks. So 307, 401, 473, good for an 874 OPS, 6 home runs, 22 walks, and 22 Ks in 49 games. There's a few preps in the mix. Notable names are Hunter Carnes, Cade Arambide, and Anderson French. Those guys are all somewhere in the like 90 to 120th on the board type of rankings. Jeremy, curious for your thoughts. Sorry, that was kind of a long rundown. Who's your favorite? Would you be interested for either the Brewers or the Twins in spending their first round pick, so 17th or 21st overall, on a catcher? Who's your guy from this class?
So first, no, I don't know that the Brewers and the Twins. I don't think that's either. That shouldn't be anywhere near the top priority, and I'll tell you why. I think the first four are going to be like whatever your team, like the flavor that you prefer, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with vanilla if you like vanilla. There's nothing wrong with chocolate if you like chocolate, but that whatever your preference is. And so Malcolm Moore was the first name that stuck out to me this year, and it was only because he wasn't playing very well.
Yep.
And you're talking about at that time the only projected first round pick, and he's just not getting it done. The part that then stuck out to me is Lamavita and Yannick really moved up draft boards, right? Had great years, yet nobody pushes Malcolm Moore, who bounced back, right? He wasn't terrible the whole year. He
Mm-hmm.
was real bad early, and so he continues to stay above everybody else. So if you're giving me the choice amongst the three, Moore would be my preference. I don't want to take one that high. I don't have such a strong preference of one over the other that it's like if I wanted to walk out, of having maybe two top 40 picks, I'm going to wait. And if Cozart's the guy that I get at 40, I have no problem with that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he'll have a chance to up his stock because he is the best catcher left still playing. Right.
Yep.
And so that would maybe be the route that I would go if I was forced to choose one of these. I'm not going to do it early.
Yep. That's so interesting, dude. I feel like we're generally on the same page with things, and I am more and more of this mindset. And you and I have started doing mock drafts at Twins Daily, Brewer Fanatic, and Northside Baseball. We'll do some videos breaking down our most recent picks for all of those teams, and have those out for folks. But I'm with you. The only guy I can kind of get behind would be Yannick, because I think the chances that he sticks behind the plate are strong, and the offensive profile doesn't have many weaknesses. But for the rest, to me, it's you're taking a guy at 17 or 21 who you can't be certain is going to stick behind the plate, and their offensive profile is not strong enough to kind of ameliorate that, right? Like, if someone is not going to stick behind the plate, they need to have a really solid, like almost no doubt offensive profile. And every one of these guys has really significant warts. I'm out on the college catching demographic if I'm the Brewers at 17 or I'm the Twins at 21. I also kind of have a theory that both these organizations, who are pretty smart and pretty model heavy, think they can accrue value at the catcher position later in the draft. The Twins have pursued that on a few occasions in the last few years. You look at guys like Andrew Cassetti is a great example. We don't know if Andrew Cassetti is going to stick as a catcher. I think the reports on his defensive catcher are kind of like, right? Didn't play much behind the dish in the AFL. But the bat is really, really solid. There's some pop there. You can get a guy like that in round 6, 7, 8. But if you use your pick at 17 or 21, you're passing on one of the more premium college bats in order to get a guy that feels really risky from a value accrual standpoint.
So let's rewind this to the 2022 draft. If Brooks Lee's off the board, who are a lot of people clamoring for?
Kevin Parada.
Okay. Have you looked at Kevin Parada's line?
I haven't. I know it's not been going well.
So in 2022, he played 13 games, had an 880 OPS. In 2023, he goes between low A, high A, and double A, combines to bat 248 with a 752 OPS. That's not good. He hit 14 home runs, which we knew he was going to hit home runs. But his 14 games at double A to end the season batted 185. He's now played 47 games at double A. His OPS is 631. He's sub 200 and has 6 home runs in 171 at bats.
Right.
Like you said, if your offensive profile is not good enough to, he's good enough to catch.
And Kevin Parada's offensive profile coming out of Georgia Tech was ridiculous. He had an unbelievable season leading up to that draft.
Right, and he's going to catch. I think. Right,
I think it's fine. I don't think it's great.
But I mean, at this point, you just used the 11th overall pick on a backup, right? Kyle Teal was the first pick last year. He's been pretty good.
Been really good.
Kyle Teal, a little more athletic, right?
That
he could play elsewhere. But you mentioned Andrew Cassetti, but how about their last 2 really good catchers? Their current one,
Brian Jeffers,
right?
Second round pick,
and everyone's like, "Who's that guy?" And then Mitch Garver, who doesn't catch as much, right? I mean, he's you can maybe point to concussions. He had a few of those. He took some foul balls off places you don't want to take foul balls and miss time, but Bro could hit and still does.
Yep.
And so, if the Twins are going to take a guy that's kind of in that type of hitterish, maybe can catch. You have 6 or 8 of those guys in your system. Somebody's going to pan out as a catcher.
Yep.
Right, because the other guy at Fort Myers, Olivar, he's probably not a catcher either.
He's at Cedar Rapids and crushing, by the way.
Okay, so is he catching it all?
He's catching a lot. I don't know if he's.
But that's the thing. It doesn't matter, right?
Right.
And so I don't want to use a first round pick. Give me a prep pitcher. Give me a
college infielder.
Well, if it's the right one. But you know what I mean? Like, and that's why this demographic, and it's interesting because I think in my mock I had 3 of them going in the first round. And I think if there's teams that are like, God, this is the year that we can get a guy, I just wouldn't pull that trigger.
No.
If it was my team.
Same.
And so, but you look at the rest of the draft and it might be like, okay, well, maybe this is the year that we do it. What would be really fun and impossible would be to somehow have someone that knows more than we do put the top 100 from last year draft prospects to the top 100 this year.
Jeez.
And like you know what I mean? Like, where do these guys fit? Is Malcolm Moore, he's the 20th ranked guy on the consensus board. Is he the 50th guy on last year's board? Is he the, you know what I mean? Like, we know how the top 5 compare. Nobody's going in the top 5 of last year's draft.
Yep.
In this draft.
Yep.
But then where does this go? Because there was that is it San Diego State kind of utility catcher guy, Carrig?
Yep, Cole Carrig. Went to the Rockies, I think.
And so there was other options there, but they were not Kyle Teal. But there was a bunch of them. The guy that I really liked, and I should have looked, he was a guy that didn't catch a ton and was drafted as like a catcher, first baseman or third baseman type. And last I saw, I thought he was doing pretty well and catching a lot. So I think that's really we're in agreement. The route that you go is, you're not getting, if you're taking the best guy, Kevin Parada, and you're getting a backup, that's worse than getting a relief pitcher out of a potential frontline starter.
I'm going to give you 2 actual catchers the Twins might be interested in later in the draft, just to name drop a couple of guys, then we'll move on. Ryan Campos, catcher out of Arizona State. We're getting in the weeds, dude. He's 155th on my board.
Okay.
And then another guy who's maybe a little bit less of a catcher, or definitely less of a sure thing. Cole Messina, South Carolina, absolutely the type of guy I want to target as a catcher. 6 foot, 230 pounds, right handed hitter, a ton of pop. He went absolutely supernova in the regionals for South Carolina. They were eliminated there.
Is he on the board? Is he not on the board?
He's on the board. He
Where is he?
is 123rd on the board, so around ahead of Ryan Campos. Um, Cole Messina is a dude. He has pop. He has a solid value accruing offensive profile, and he's a type of guy you might be able to teach to catch solidly enough. That's what I think you do. I think we're on the same page. We're out on this so-called stronger catching class.
Okay, so I'm looking at your board here. You're talking about Campos, who's 155. Um, two above him is a prep catcher out of SoCal.
Nicholas Montgomery.
The Twins. I mean, if you looked at the demographics they choose from, that tells you one thing. If you looked at if you had a push pin and put it in a United States map, they like to draft Southern California, and I think a lot of teams do because that's a good place to get talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing that I look at, like where are they, where do the picks populate from, and that's one that sticks out to me. I don't know, when was the last time the Twins took a South Carolina guy? They've taken a tons of North Carolina guys.
Good question. I definitely don't know off the
And
top
I
of my
think
head.
you establish relationships with your scouts, establish relationships with college coaches and different people, and that's worth a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's not to say that there's any relationship between the Twins and Cypress High School, but that would be something that I'd be way more interested in doing. However, who's going to cost more, a prep catcher or the
I'll take
college?
you can give me the college guy at 150 and I'll be very happy.
Do any of those guys bat left-handed?
Mm,
Because I do think that long term, the Twins would love to have and I think this is not just the Twins. I think the Brewers would like this too. Um, Kind of a two-man game where you have your lefty hitting catcher and your righty hitting catcher.
yeah.
There's not a lot of lefty hitting catchers.
Campos hits left-handed.
So that would be, I think at some point that's going to be something that teams start to emphasize a little bit, just because you see so much of this platooning happening.
For sure. All right, let's move on to talk about second base. An interesting demographic. It's going to be exclusively college guys here, right? So just to name this up front, anyone who is a prep player who might eventually be a second baseman is currently a shortstop.
Right.
So that's not really prep second baseman, but college second baseman. We'll whiz through this. I do think there are some names of note for that the Twins and Brewers in particular might appeal to them. We got to do the two at the top just to be thorough. Travis Bazzana, currently number 2 at the board, could overtake Condon and go back to number 1 when we're done here. Through regionals, I pulled his data: 416, 574, 935 slug.
Jesus.
He played in 58 games, walked 74 times, just 34 strikeouts. I mean, just a really solid, polished hitter. JJ Weatherholt, currently number 7 in the board, was the number 1 guy coming into the season. If JJ Weatherholt stays healthy, he is going to seem like great value, in my opinion. Only played 36 games because of soft tissue injuries this season. Still hit 331, 472, 589, 8 home runs in 36 games, and 30 walks. The hit tool is really, really special there. Christian Moore. This is one of my guys, Jeremy. Christian Moore. He is somehow 35th on the board. There is no way that Christian Moore is getting out of the first round. I think I've heard heat on him from pick like 13 onwards. He is the second baseman at Tennessee. Tennessee are still playing through super regionals. He hit 376, 453, 796 with 32 home runs, 35 walks, and 45 Ks in 66 games. That
Yeah.
is just ridiculous.
Yeah,
Um,
the more, and I guess you'll probably ask me this later, but the more, the closer we get to the draft, and the more I hear about Christian Moore, and you kind of alluded to it in your mock draft, he's going to. I would be more surprised if he got to the Twins
for
than
sure.
if he didn't.
I agree.
But kind of based on what I said before, look at where teams have gone, and the Twins seem to have established a decent relationship with the Tennessee kids. They've drafted a handful of them
Mm-hmm.
since 2020, and so I would say he's got to be on the short list to be. And obviously you're drafting the 20, so the list can't be super short. But I would guess the Twins at this point have seen enough of him to like him, and we'll see more of Moore because they're the best team in college baseball right now. They got a lot
Yeah.
of baseball left.
Their offense is extremely fun to watch. And we're probably going to circle back to talk about him a bit more later because we have a question about what is the best case outcome for the Twins at 21. And I feel like his name could be involved in that discussion. Two more guys I want to highlight. These are two guys that we haven't talked about further down the board, but I love taking shots at this dude. I love doing my try and pick out profiles that teams will like. And I got two here that I think are interesting. So Peyton Stovall, he is Arkansas second baseman. He's currently 78th on the board. Just a really hitter, what I would call a hitterish profile. In the SEC, he hit 340, 409, 535. That's good for a 944 OPS. This is the 78th ranked player in the draft, mind you. Hit 9 home runs, so like a little bit of pop, not a ton. 20 walks, 41 Ks in 48 games. Just like a really good hitter. It's like an above average hit tool, controls the strike zone decently well, plays on the dirt. That's the kind of profile the Twins have been attracted to with their later day one picks. Luke Keyshaw, a good example. Tanner Schobel, another good example. And then a second guy, Gage Miller. The headline here, I think, is less defensive certainty, more offensive upside, if that's your bag. So he plays for Alabama, 381, 474, 702. That's good for a 1.176 OPS. That's crazy for a guy ranked close to 100 on the board. Hit 18 home runs this year, walked 27 times, and struck out 24 in 55 games. So doesn't walk a ton, doesn't strike out a ton. Some really, really solid impact in the bat there. Either of those guys strike your fancy? Do you have a favorite from this demographic or a guy who you are watching most closely in the next 6 weeks?
Well, I mean, if we're just talking about the favorite in the whole demographic, I like the second best player in the draft. um, but he's going to go probably first. Christian Moore's intriguing just because of the whole package. The guys that you pointed out too are the types of players that teams kind of sometimes stumble into. Eddie Julian for the Twins back in the day, he was
Yep.
playing third base for Auburn and playing it horrifically. Cost them the College World Series. If you go back and watch that game, he literally committed an error
It wasn't
that
great.
that should have ended the game and it didn't, and then they lost. And he was a different situation because he was eligible a year early. Said he was going back. The Twins threw money at him. So I don't think that the defensive thing really matters. So when you say Gage Miller's got a better offensive profile with more defensive questions, I would say I don't think the Twins care so much about the defense because if you can find someone that can hit really, really well, you're going to find a spot for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the guy out of those other two that would stick out more for me. And the Twins have drafted from Alabama, and
Mm-hmm.
one of their unsigned guys 2 years ago was an Alabama guy. They took
Connor Prelip was an Alabama kid
from Alabama, and I feel like there was maybe one more. And so I think there's a relationship there, and I know that they scout the SEC heavily because you'd be idiots not to. So maybe it's less to do with relationships and more than just you go to where the best players are, and the best players are in the SEC and the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think if Gage Miller is someone that you can run out at third base and give a shot to, you do that. And then if he ends up at second base or first base or DH, like, worry about the defensive spectrum later if you know that the guys can hit. So,
Yep.
Overall, I don't think it's a super exciting demographic just because, like you mentioned, there's so many guys that'll end up at second base that are gallivanting as prep shortstops.
For sure.
And I think that the Twins have really kind of leaned into taking guys that don't fit into a specific defensive demographic, worried about their hitter profile. So, and that's worked out for the most part. It sounds like with Alex Kirilloff, he's getting optioned down. So,
oh, he is? I didn't even see that.
That
must be fresh news then. No?
Yeah, that's what I saw on my phone a while ago. Okay. So, but he was the hard part with Kirilloff is that first base, kind of an outfielder, and if you can't hit, where else do you go?
Right.
But I think that's kind of the name of the game with that's what we say with catchers. That's what we're saying with second baseman. So really, if there's something that sticks out, you talk a lot about exit velocity, right? Chase rate. Like, what is it that the Twins are most focused on, and find those guys that fit that demographic and worry about everything else later.
And that thing, in my opinion, is controlling the strike zone well. Okay, why don't we move on to some listener questions here? We've got 2 here, dude. I'm hoping you can read this first one. I'm gonna give you some options, and then I'm gonna ask you to kind of tackle the second one. Maybe we can both weigh in on that one, because I think we're both starting to have some opinions about it, even though we're a little ways out from the draft still.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'll read this first one, and I love that you stick me with reading the Spanish names because I'm excellent at
you read the question. I got the answer.
Oh, and I can read one name, right? All right. So Max via email. Do we get a lot of emails?
We get some emails.
Nice.
Which is wild to me.
Beyond Yandro Hernandez.
Very good, Jeremy.
Who are some of the Dominican Summer League prospects to watch?
Yo, so first of all, it is wild that we get emails, and I really appreciate that, because we set up an email for the show, and I was like, there's no one's ever going to send us an email. People will send us emails. Max, your email address is crazy, by the way. I'm not going to blow up your spot here, but wow. Okay, so Yandro Hernandez was a Cuban prospect the Twins signed for like $800,000. We talked about him a little bit. Here's some like lightning fast highlights of DSL guys you want to track. Diber de los Santos, he was their highest paid guy out of this year's class. The Twins paid him $1.9 million. He's a short. They're all shortstops. He's a shortstop, plus speed, big arm, solid power. I think take all of these notes with like a massive grain of salt. Like, he's already made like 6 errors at shortstop in like 3 or 4 games. It's going to be raw. It's going to be a work in progress. But he has big potential. Eduardo Beltre was their other big signing. They signed him for $1.5 million. He is injured at the moment. I believe he has a wrist injury. He's an outfielder with good power and good speed. 4 more guys. Victor Leal is a catcher out of Venezuela. All the catchers come from Venezuela. Twins signed him for $450,000. Nestor Urbina, he's a shortstop from Venezuela. He's kind of a pure hitter type. The Twins signed him for $400,000. He's one to keep an eye on. The Twins do this a lot, right? So they're going to always, or their recent activity has suggested that they will take 2 or 3 guys in the $1 to $2 million range, and then several guys in the $400,000 to $600,000 range, which I think is a solid strategy. Alvar Medina is another shortstop. He signed for $400,000. The tools here are a speed, a good arm. He's a really good defensive shortstop, and it's definitely kind of hit over power on the offensive side. And then I'm going to throw one more name your way, and this is my favorite, because we talked with Ben Badler, I don't know, like 20 episodes ago, about why do pitchers never land big bonuses? Well, the reason is because they're all 16, and you give your big bonuses to hitters
Right.
because it's really difficult to project pitchers at that age. Yoel Roque is a Dominican right-handed pitcher. He is currently 17 years old, and his fastball is up to 97 miles per hour. That is unusual velocity for a slender 17-year-old Dominican kid. And so having a guy like that have a big velocity jump is really, really interesting. I think they only signed him for like $40,000. And that's often the case we see is the guys who end up popping are guys that, he signed for a small amount of money and then suddenly he grew 3 inches and is throwing 7 miles per hour harder, right? Some of those physical developments impact that stuff. But those were a few guys who I would keep an eye on. I would also just encourage folks. The DSL games are usually early in the day. Get in amongst it with the box score every day and start tracking who you notice is doing well, because there are undoubtedly guys who are not on that list of 5 or 6 names I just gave. And it's always fun to kind of track these prospects we know so little about and don't really have much data on.
Yeah, the thing that makes the pitchers, I think, so hard is you can have a smaller hitter, and if they can get their hands through the zone and impact the ball, like you can just kind of tell with hitters, right?
For sure.
With pitchers, was it Michael Wanoa all those years ago that got this enormous bonus? Well, he was kind of maxed out physically. So as a 16-year-old, as a 15-year-old, as a 14-year-old, he was just better. But I mean, he did still reach the major leagues. His brother was drafted by signed by the Twins and traded, and he got a decent bonus too. But it's just so much harder to project anything, so teams just aren't going to do it. And I wonder, what point are we going to see guys in those countries just not really want to pitch? You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm gonna be a hitter. Because reality is, I bet you we see the same amount of pitchers make it out of the Dominican, and like you said, catchers come from Venezuela. Yeah, I just there's a lot of things that are really interesting.
For sure. So keep track of those guys. Appreciate the question, Max. Thanks for sending it in. Thanks for sending us an email, man. It's appreciated. Last but not least for today, a question from Josiah, who's a frequent question asker for us. Thank you for continuing to send them in. Jeremy, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you're going to answer first.
Let's go.
What do you think are some, I said some, but he said, what is the ideal scenario for the Twins at 21? Are you forming any opinions? Because remember we had Carlos on last week and you're like, I'm not really ready to kind of say. I'm curious where you're at with the Twins' first round pick.
So I think the ideal scenario is, as a draft fan, you eliminate the people that you think have no chance of falling to the Twins, right? We did it a couple years ago. Brooks Lee wasn't going to fall to the Twins. The ideal scenario then is that one of those guys that you have crossed out falls to the Twins. I think way back the Kyle Gibson draft, like Kyle Gibson wasn't falling to the Twins, and then he did, and then they took him. Last year, I think that was kind of the ideal scenario because they moved up. Max Clark went. Twins got their guy. And so, I mean, what we try to do is we try to locate the guys, identify the guys that the Twins are really seem like Twins type players, right? And so I think the 2 Florida State guys seem like type players. I think they both are gone. And I think they're gone significantly before. Tibbs anyway. I think Tibbs goes top 10. I'm not going to back off that one. I think he goes to the Angels. And
that would be so wild if someone like Hagen Smith is on the board and they take Tibbs. Keep going.
And then I think Cam Smith makes sense, but I think he'll be off the board. And then you have a whole bunch, you're kind of in that range where you have a bunch of high school guys. You never really know how that's going to bounce. So if you're the Twins and that's not really your flavor of the draft, then it's like, okay, then somebody else is dropping. And I could see that somebody else or rising, I guess. Um, a Christian Moore would be the type of guy that I think the Twins would target. Slade Caldwell, I've said all along, I think that he has huge fans in the front office. Um, that would be um, maybe not the ideal pick at 21, but would be a very good pick. The question that I don't have the answer to, that I don't know that we ever will, maybe we will later, um, are there college pitchers that fit anywhere in the top of the Twins board, right? Because once you get by those three, it's kind of wide open, right? Brody Brecht is a name that is probably the fourth, right? Um, are there anybody that the Twins even have an interest in? Because I would love for them to get the best prep pitcher at 21. I think that would be awesome. I think that would be ideal, right?
Which is what they did a couple of years ago, right? With Chase Petty.
But he wasn't the best prep pitcher. We don't know where that's going to happen. Like, how high is Caminiti going to go?
I think he's going to go to the Giants at 13.
You have Mayfield at 15. Okay. But then you don't have another one going until Sloan at 25. Mm-hmm. So I would say there's a good chance that whoever the Twins have as the top prep pitcher on their board is there at 21. Okay. That's not really their style, mm-hmm. But it did pay dividends in that they turned that guy into Sonny Gray and turned Sonny Gray into a pick this year, and they won some playoff games because there's value. Yeah. There's value in pitchers. And if you look at, Zebby Matthews has really helped himself. But I think what we've seen this year is we've seen hitters move themselves up in the prospect rankings, and we're not drafting for need, right? But if you can just add a really, really high ceiling impact arm into your stable of pitchers, I think that outweighs the possibility of adding another hitterish type bat, because the reality is the Twins major league team isn't. Correa's a little bit older, right? Buxton's 30. Kepler's going to be a free agent, mm-hmm. But Jeffers has some years left. Royce Lewis is going to be, if he continues, maybe the greatest baseball player of all time. Dude, just, you know what I mean? Miranda looks better. Yeah. Like the shelf life on lineup guys is longer. Mm-hmm. And there's just Brooks Lee's going to get a shot. Erod's going to get a shot. Walker Jenkins is going to get there soon, relatively. Keyshaw is going to be a dude. Eddie Julian is still at AAA. Like, I'm not drafting for need, but man, I feel good about so many hitter positions that ideally, if I can get one of the best pitchers, I like that. I would like that for my draft, and that's not really mm-hmm. how I always operate. But if Moore's gone, Caldwell's gone, the Florida State guys are gone, are you going to take a prep shortstop that's not going to play shortstop that has questions about their hit tool? I don't know.
Now I was feeling like more clear on this, and now you've just like made me feel less clear. I feel you though. Like, I think there's a couple of ways I think about this possibly going, right? One is that there's a college hitter you like who falls your way. And I think that is a possibility. Not Tibbs, but say Cameron Smith. Yep. Maybe the Twins really like Carson Bench. Maybe the Twins really like Seaver King. Or Vance Honeycutt, like really like more toolsy. I know Honeycutt has some.
But watch. Here's the thing: is if you just watch Vance Honeycutt,
you know what I mean? To fall in love, dude.
Yeah, my kids were watching. They're like, "Dad, who is this guy?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's Vance Honeycutt."
But the prep pitching thing is interesting because there's now 3 or 4 guys who have established themselves as separate from the rest of the bunch. And I actually am not a huge fan of Caminiti. I think he's going to be gone, so it's not going to be irrelevant. But I prefer 3 guys of that bunch. William Schmidt, he's currently 16 on the board. We've talked about him for just forever. projectable fastball up to 98, best curveball in the draft, maybe. Cash Mayfield's up to 21 on the consensus board. Everyone talks about how great the delivery is. And then Ryan Sloan is 23rd. And I do think there's a strong chance they tap into this prep pitching class either 21, 33, or sometime on day one, right? And I want to go back to this thing when we had this conversation with Ezra where we asked him this question about the perception that the Twins like college bats. I literally chopped up the data from the last 3 drafts this week, and I sent it to you.
Yep.
The last 3 drafts, and I chose the last 3 because the Twins have really excelled in those 3, right? Immediately after 2020 COVID year when it was only 5 rounds and it was weird. They've had 9 day 1 picks in that time. They've taken 4 prep players and 5 college players. It's basically a 50-50 split, and then you could expect them to go super college heavy on day 2 and day 3.
Right.
So I like the I like the prep pitcher option. One other name I'm going to throw out there that I think is going to be unpopular with some folks because we haven't talked about him a lot, and then we'll get out of here.
You're going to say a college outfielder, aren't you?
Oh, what?
A college outfielder?
Nope.
Okay.
Kalen Culpepper, who
was mocked to the Twins by me.
Who we have not talked about a ton. He's currently 33rd on the board. A couple of things that have become more clear. It is more clear that he might stick at shortstop, which is a big deal because this class of college shortstops is really poor. And then the one other thing I want to mention is this. He made some swing adjustments prior to regional. And at regional, he hit for the cycle and hit a 3-run home run off Hagen Smith. And so that's not changing anyone's mind, right? But I think he's enough of an athlete and has enough tools that he would be one of the guys under consideration. I know that they scouted him fairly heavily at the beginning of the year, and so he's one of the guys I'd kind of throw in the mix. Give me Christian Moore at 21, dude. I'd be happy.
Yeah, but then I look at your data and I see that the Twins have drafted 0 prep pitchers in the last 3 years, left-handed prep pitchers, right? And then I'm like, God, if they could get Cash Mayfield, or if they could get Schmidt, if they just took a left-handed prep guy, he would immediately become their best left-handed pitching prospect.
He'd be a first, and it's wild because they have taken left-handed college guys, right? They took Povich and Steven Hajar back-to-back rounds a couple of years ago, both of whom are no longer with the organization. But Kay Povich, by the way, had a great start for the Orioles against the Braves today. I think wrapped up his first Major League win, so congrats to him.
And Povich was
don't want to talk about the trade.
No, but where was he drafted out of?
Nebraska.
Okay, and the other guy, Hajar, was drafted out of
Michigan.
So there's a thing where they do draft guys from the Midwest and the Northeast, right? Kind of the less exposed places. They took like Stashak. They took I'm trying to think of some of these other guys. They certainly take pitchers out of California. Yep. They were a very, very heavy draft pitchers out of Texas Texas team when one of their scouts that's no longer with the team produced probably more than a handful of professional major league pitchers. He's with the Blue Jays now, so there hasn't been a lot of as many arms drafted from Texas. But the Twins have really had success drafting Northeast and Midwest pitchers, with the exception of like Tyler J didn't work out. And that's the thing, like your hit rate on pitchers is going to be low anyway. And so, who's the pitcher? So you have Brody Brecht, obviously, Big Ten pitcher.
Ryan Sloan's from Illinois.
Sloan. So Ryan Sloan was the name that I was looking for there. Right-handed pitcher, Illinois. That would be a name that I could see. but you never know. And so much of it, I mean, we could sit here and we could go through all the iterations of how this could go. The reality is there's going to be 20 of these guys crossed off the list, and we don't know. I mean, we have a pretty good feeling that 1 through 11 are going to be crossed off.
Yep.
But then after that, it could be the guy number 40 and number 27. Joey Oki from Iowa. I think that's another one that could make sense. They took a prep pitcher out of Wisconsin last year.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is kind of the, if you want to take a deep dive, you start looking at stuff like that and you're like, man, they do draft a lot of their pitchers from the Midwest, the Northeast, and the far Southwest. That's not to say they haven't taken guys from other places, but that to me is stuff that just jumps out.
For sure. Fun stuff. We're going to continue to deliberate on that. We will call it a day there. Apologies for the earlier technical issues or any audio issues that you guys encounter. A little bit of weather. I think the second half of the show was smooth. We will be back with another episode next week. We will dig into some more draft demographics, highlight some more minor league guys as we get down into the 20s of number of days it is until the draft. Jeremy, we might also be ready to announce our draft plans next week for folks. So
we're gonna need better connectivity.
We need to figure out the internet by then. Until then, thank you guys for checking out the show. You can follow us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. You can send us an email, destination the show at gmail.com. Excuse me. Be cool like Max. Until then, appreciate you guys for checking out the show, and we'll see you next week. Take it easy.